Hey everyone, John from Burley Strength here today to talk to you about monolifts. Now, this is a topic that comes up very often, always around this time of year, when we go to our first novice powerlifting comp of the year. Now, a lot of you may not have seen a monolift before, especially if you're relatively new to powerlifting. Currently, there are, to my knowledge, 5 in Canberra, and 3 of them are in Burley Strength, so it's no surprise. They're not particularly common in your average commercial gym. A little bit intimidating, but ultimately quite simple once you get the hang of things. It's essentially a very over-designed squat rack, right? There are a few key features that make it a little bit safer than your average squat rack. Also make it a little bit more functional for competitions, right? The first of those is that the height of the bar is controlled by, I don't think you can see it from this shot, but it's controlled by a hydraulic bottle jack, so it's just like the same sort of jack you'd have in your car. And that means when we've got a couple of 100 kilos on the bar, we don't have to take all the plates off to change the rack height. The other advantage, these hooks actually spin in towards the middle like that. So if you're, like me, a little bit wider than the average and have not the best shoulder mobility in the world, you can take a wider grip without worrying about catching your hands in the rack. Obviously, you can also see these safety straps. Now, the big idea here is these straps are there to prevent you from being crushed by the bar in the event that you miss a squat. Now, in our competitions, I think in 4 years of running competitions, I think we've only ever had 1, maybe 2 squats actually hit the straps. Generally, what's going to happen is you're going to have at least 1 spotter behind you and 1 on either side, and they're going to catch you so that you don't hit the straps. But these are just another added bit of safety that are there in the event of an emergency. The big advantage with the monolift is that, as you can see, these hooks move, right? So in a traditional squat rack, you would have to lift the bar up and you would have to walk it back from the rack. In a monolift, you can set up in your squat stance, stand straight up and do your squat from there. These hooks then, in the competition, would swing back in and allow the bar to be put back in the rack. So this is something that gets, I think, underutilized by people in our novice comps, especially because these aren't very common, right? And so people are a little bit scared about how to use it, what the best method to use it is, that sort of thing. Couple of tips so that you can play around with things. We now have 2 in our warm-up rooms, which means that you'll have an opportunity at our comps to do at least some of your warm-ups on a monolift, which is definitely going to mean that those that have not done it before can get a bit of practice in. A couple of things, as I said, to sort of help perfect your monolift setup. One of the big safety issues is don't ever put your hands through the straps, right? So what you might find is the straps will be in a little bit, and a lot of people will do this. What's then going to happen is, in the event that an emergency happens and you have to drop the bar into the straps, your hand's going to get pinned between the bar and the straps. So in the event these straps are in, put your hand on the outside of the strap so that you're always free to move away from it. The other big thing is setting your feet. So in every powerlifting federation I know of, if you move your feet after the squat command, you get red lights. So one of the big advantages, as I said before, of a monolift is you can stand straight up and you don't have to walk backwards. To take advantage of that, you need to be able to set your feet in the same stance that you squat with and underneath the bar. So one of the most common issues is people set their feet too far back and they end up having to do what's essentially a good morning in order to get the bar out of the rack. What we want is you to be in a position where your feet are directly under the bar so that when you stand up, the bar goes straight up, the hooks can come out, and you can do your squat from there. So you'll find, or a lot of people will find, that initially putting your feet all the way forward will make it feel a little bit awkward and maybe like you're too far forward. The big trick is just being able to get your hips underneath the bar so you can stand straight up and do your squat from there. The other thing is our monolifts are all stocked with squat bars, which are thicker than your average barbell. So this one in particular is a Sportscraft squat bar, which is the same as the one on our competition platform. Our third monolift has a Texas squat bar in it. They are all much thicker than a normal power bar, and so it may take a little bit of getting used to find that spot on your back. And that's the other big mistake I think people make, is they have the rack too high. or too low. When you set your pin height in your, like when you're doing your weigh-ins, make sure that you account for the fact that you're going to have weight on your back. So a lot of people forget that when you put weight on a squat bar, you're actually going to shrink slightly. So you end up in a position where people set a rack height without any weight on the bar, or often they'll set a rack height without their squat shoes on, and it'll be too high and they won't be able to get it out of the rack. I would always err on the side of slightly too low than slightly too high. I think that's about it in terms of monolifts. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. This is going to go on Facebook and on YouTube, so just drop a comment in, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up. Otherwise, I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers.